They said he simply walked out of his office one rainy evening in 1988 and never came back. No goodbye, no note, no body. Dr. William Harrow, a respected physician in the quiet town of Fairhaven, vanished as though the world itself had swallowed him whole. For 15 years, whispers filled the silence he left behind. Affairs, debts, a secret past, or worse, something darker. The strangest part? His house, a sprawling Victorian at the edge of town, stood untouched all that time. No one dared to live there, not because of police tape, but because of what locals claimed to hear at night. Footsteps in the attic, lights flickering even though the power was long shut off, and faint, desperate voices calling from behind the walls. It wasn't until the summer of 2003 that the house finally gave up its secret. But before that discovery, the legend of Dr. Harrow grew like ivy across Fairhaven. He hadn't been just any doctor. He was the kind people trusted with their lives. He'd delivered half the babies in town through the late 70s, patched up farmhands after accidents, and was known for visiting elderly patients at home with his signature black bag. He was a man of routine, morning rounds at the hospital, evening tea in his study, a walk through his overgrown garden at dusk. And then on September 9th, the timeline was thin. A nurse recalled seeing him exit the hospital around 7:15 p.m., carrying his worn leather briefcase. A neighbor claimed they noticed his car parked in the driveway later that night. The next morning, the car was still there, keys on the front seat, driver's door locked, but Harrow wasn't inside. Police searched every room of his creaking house. Everything was in place. His kettle on the stove, mail stacked neatly, his coat on the rack by the door. Nothing was missing except him. What kept investigators unsettled wasn't just the lack of evidence. It was the study. His desk was immaculate, papers aligned with surgeon-like precision, but lying dead center was his medical journal, open to a page dated the night of his disappearance. Only one line was written, scrawled in a frantic hand that didn't match his usual steady script. It's inside the walls now. For years the case sat cold, a ghost file, collecting dust in the county archives. The house was sealed, but not officially condemned. Teenagers dared each other to break in. Few made it past the porch. Those who did swore the air inside was suffocatingly heavy, as if the rooms themselves were watching. 15 years later, when ownership disputes finally settled and the town prepared to auction the property, officials entered to catalog its contents. That's when everything began unraveling. Deputy Claire Hensley was the first inside. A rookie back in '88, she had always felt haunted by Harrow's case. Now a seasoned officer, she expected dust and decay. She didn't expect to find the study unchanged, as though time had paused. The desk was still neat, the kettle still perched on the stove, though rusted. But the journal, Harrow's journal, was no longer closed. Its pages had been turned, somehow, though no one had entered in over a decade. On that fresh page, written in the same frantic scrawl, "Don't follow the sound." Claire froze. That was only the beginning. As word spread, Fairhaven buzzed with speculation. Journalists descended, conspiracy forums lit up, and neighbors once again remembered things they had forgotten or chosen to forget. One swore they'd heard screams from the house on winter nights. Another said Harrow had been experimenting with something unholy. The hospital director quietly admitted that some of Harrow's medical files had mysteriously vanished the week after he disappeared. But what no one could explain was how the journal kept changing. Over the next week, officials checking the property reported subtle differences. Pages filled with half-legible notes appeared where once there had been blanks. Strange sketches, crooked hallways, human silhouettes without faces, spiral-like patterns spread across margins. The handwriting looked like Harrow's, but jagged, uneven, as though written in the dark. The most chilling entry appeared on the 7th day of the inspection. Claire herself found it. A single sentence, written in thick ink. The house remembers. From that point on, what began as a simple auction preparation turned into a full investigation. Teams returned with cameras, measuring devices, even specialists in old architecture. What they uncovered in Harrow's house unsettled even the most skeptical minds. Walls thicker than the blueprints suggested, hidden crawl spaces that didn't connect to any logical structure, and most disturbing of all, a locked door in the basement that wasn't marked on any plan, a door that no one could manage to open. Claire felt herself drawn to that door, though she couldn't explain why. Each night after visiting the house, her dreams twisted into the same vision. Standing in Harrow's study, hearing a faint scratching in the walls, then turning to find the door behind her. Not in the basement, but standing right in the middle of the room. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, the echo of that journal line burning in her head. Don't follow the sound. By the second week, the house had already gained national attention. News crews called it the Doctor's Tomb. Paranormal enthusiasts flocked to Fairhaven, some camping outside the property line, hoping to catch glimpses of movement in the windows. The auction was postponed indefinitely, but for Claire, the obsession ran deeper. She remembered Harrow, not just as a case, but as a man. He treated her father when he was dying, stopping by their farm late at night to check his breathing, never accepting more than a cup of coffee in payment. He had been kind, methodical, almost fatherly in his presence. The idea that he'd simply abandoned everything never sat right with her, and now, with each cryptic journal entry surfacing, she felt as if he was still reaching out, still speaking. One evening, while reviewing the journal in the evidence room, she noticed something peculiar. The ink on the latest entries shimmered faintly under UV light, as though freshly written. But the ink composition, according to lab tests, was decades old. How could words be fresh and aged at the same time? Then she saw it, tucked between two pages near the middle of the book, a folded scrap of paper. Inside, a drawing. Not like the others. This one was clearer, deliberate. It showed the front of Harrow's house, sketched in his unmistakable hand. But in the drawing, the house wasn't alone. Behind it, faint but visible, was a second structure, one that didn't exist in real life. A smaller house, fused awkwardly to the back, like a tumor. Beneath the sketch, 3 words. Find the second. Claire's pulse quickened. She knew she had found the first real clue. Something Harrow wanted uncovered. What she didn't know yet was that finding the second would change everything about the case, about Fairhaven, and about her own place in the story. And the house was only just beginning to reveal itself. The clue haunted Claire for days. Find the second. She carried the drawing folded neatly in her pocket, checking it during quiet moments, as though it might change when she wasn't looking. Every time she unfolded the page, she traced the thin lines of that second house behind Harrow's real one. It was grotesque, like an afterthought, clinging to the Victorian, crooked and malformed. Yet, no one who had ever lived in Fairhaven remembered a second structure. No records in city archives, no photographs, nothing. Claire decided she had to see the property again. Not with a team, not with cameras, alone. She returned one foggy evening just after sunset, when the crowds of paranormal tourists had thinned, and the reporters had gone back to their hotels. The house loomed at the end of the gravel drive, its sharp gables cutting into the twilight. Windows reflected faint traces of orange sky, but the rest was swallowed in shadow. Her flashlight beam danced across the facade as she circled the house. The ivy had grown thicker since her last visit, curling in dark veins across the bricks. She tried to match Harrow's sketch comparing corners, window placement, roof angles, but no matter how carefully she studied it, there was no second house to be found. Just the original standing solitary. And yet, something was wrong about the back wall. She pressed her palm against the bricks. It felt cooler than the rest, almost damp. When she tapped it, the echo was hollow, not solid. Her breath caught. This wasn't just a wall. It was hiding something. The discovery gnawed at her. Over the following days, Claire pulled blueprints of the Harrow property from the county office. All showed the same structure, no addition. She combed through old photographs in the town archive, grainy black and whites of the doctor's house, taken during parades, church picnics, and block parties. In every image, the house stood alone, yet the drawing told a different story. She reached out to James Alden, a retired surveyor who had worked in Fairhaven in the 1970s and 80s. His memory was sharp, his tone blunt. Second house? Never saw one. But Harrow was odd. Paid me once to mark out boundaries that didn't exist. Said it was for insurance. Alden shrugged. I thought maybe he was hiding debts. But now, he didn't finish the thought. Claire wasn't convinced. She returned to the property again, this time with tools, a mallet, a crowbar, and a crow's patience. Under moonlight, she positioned herself against that hollow wall at the rear of the house. The first strike echoed unnaturally loud. Bricks crumbled faster than she expected, as though they'd been set loosely on purpose. Within minutes, she had carved a jagged hole, wide enough to peer through. Her flashlight cut into darkness and revealed wood paneling. A hidden passage. She pulled more bricks until she could squeeze inside. The air was stale, tinged with mold and something metallic. She stepped into a narrow hallway no wider than her shoulders. The walls were unfinished, planks nailed hastily. Dust motes floated in her light. The passage sloped downward slightly, like a throat leading deeper into the earth. After 20 feet, she reached a door, simple, unpainted, with a rusted iron handle. Her hand trembled as she pressed it. The hinges groaned, and the door swung open. Inside was a room, small, square, and suffocating. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with glass jars, filled with yellowed liquids. Some contained objects Claire couldn't name, twisted fragments, bones, things that looked almost human but not quite. On the far side, a desk sat beneath a single bulb, its cord disappearing into the ceiling where no wiring should have been. And on the desk, another journal. Her breath quickened as she approached. The journal was bound in black leather, identical to the one upstairs. Its cover was sticky with dust, but the pages inside were crisp, as though untouched by time. The first entry was dated August 12, 1988, 1 month before Harrow vanished. The walls are thinning. I hear them at night, in the spaces where the plaster bends. They whisper of a place behind this place. A second, a mirror. I have begun the tests. Claire flipped through, each entry more fevered than the last. Harrow wrote of field anomalies, of patients who swore they saw themselves standing in the corner of his office. He described shifts in his house, doors where none had been, staircases leading to rooms that weren't real. One line made Claire's skin prickle. The second house is almost complete. It is not built. It is grown. A noise startled her, a faint scraping, like nails dragging across wood. She spun, flashlight trembling. The sound came from the wall behind the desk. For a moment, she swore it pulsed outward, as if something inside were pressing to get out. She forced herself to leave. She stuffed the journal into her bag, retraced her steps through the hidden hall, and stumbled into the cold night air. Back at her apartment, she laid both journals side by side, the one from the study and the one from the hidden room. They felt like two halves of the same voice, one public, one secret, and together, they painted a terrifying picture. Harrow hadn't just been a doctor. He had been experimenting with space itself, with the fabric of reality inside his own home. But why? The answer arrived sooner than Claire expected. 3 nights later, she dreamed again. of the study. Only this time, the dream was clearer. She stood before the desk, both journals open. The scratching in the walls grew louder. She turned toward the sound, and there it was. The second house, not behind the first, but overlapping it, shimmering like heat waves. Its windows were dark voids. Its door was ajar. She woke gasping, heart hammering. On her nightstand lay the second journal, exactly where she'd left it, but its last page was now different. In fresh ink, words stared up at her. You opened it. Now it remembers you. Claire slammed the book shut, chest tight with dread. This wasn't just Harrow's story anymore. Whatever he had unleashed inside that house, she had just let it notice her. And the deeper she dug, the harder it became to shake the feeling that Dr. William Harrow hadn't vanished at all, that he was still inside. Claire didn't sleep the rest of that night. The message in the journal glowed in her mind like a brand. You opened it. Now it remembers you. She wanted to dismiss it as a trick of exhaustion, a hallucination brought on by staring at old ink for too long. But the page was still there in the morning, still damp with the shine of fresh writing. The handwriting was identical to Harrow's. He'd been gone for 15 years, yet somehow he was still writing. Her research shifted into obsession. She scoured every medical publication, every archived newspaper article, searching for Harrow's name. Most described him as a brilliant but eccentric physician, known for unorthodox treatments. He had lectured once at a regional conference on the psychoacoustic properties of confined spaces, but his work had never been published. The trail always ended in September 1988, the night he disappeared from his home without a trace. Neighbors had reported hearing strange noises the week before, a low hum, like machinery, though Harrow owned nothing of the kind. Others swore they saw lights flickering through the windows at odd hours, flashes that painted the ivy a sickly green. Police searched the property, but found nothing. It was as though the man had walked into his house and dissolved into air. Claire returned to the hidden journal, forcing herself past the chilling scrawls and half-coherent diagrams. Around the final pages, Harrow described something he called the confluence. He believed his house sat on a weak seam, a tier in space where two versions of reality overlapped. The second house, he wrote, is not a creation of mine, but a parasite. It grows in the cracks, a reflection built wrong. The journal ended abruptly, with a final line, smudged by a handprint. Tonight, I enter. If I return, I will not be alone. Claire exhaled, hands shaking. He hadn't vanished. He had stepped inside. Still, reading about it wasn't enough. She had to see it. The next evening, armed with a camera, recorder, and a steadying flask of courage, she returned once more to Harrow's property. The moon was bright, spilling silver across the weeds. She slipped through the crumbled hole she'd made and entered the passage. Every step echoed louder than the last. The hidden room looked unchanged. Shelves of grotesque jars, the desk, the journal she'd already taken. But something about the air was heavier now, as if the walls leaned closer. She switched on the recorder. This is Claire, her voice trembled. August 17th, 2003. I'm standing inside what I believe to be Dr. Harrow's concealed study. I've confirmed evidence of experiments related to spatial anomalies. The scratching cut her off. Louder this time. More deliberate. It came from the wall behind the desk again. She raised the camera, filming as the paneling shuddered outward, bulging like a lung. Her heart thundered, and then silence. She inched closer. The wood was warm to the touch, vibrating faintly beneath her fingertips. Forcing herself forward, she pressed her ear against it. At first, nothing. Then, whispers. Dozens of them, overlapping, hissing through the grain. She couldn't make out words, only the rhythm, like voices underwater. Suddenly a single word surfaced. clear and sharp. Claire. She stumbled backward, the camera clattering to the floor. Her name. It had said her name. Breathing hard, she scanned the walls for seams or cracks, and that's when she noticed it. A faint outline etched in the paneling. A door frame she hadn't seen before. The whispers grew louder, beckoning. Her hands shook as she pushed. The wood gave way with a groan. Beyond was darkness. Not just unlit, but a total absence of light. The beam of her flashlight barely penetrated, swallowed whole within feet. Still, she stepped through. The air changed immediately. Heavy, thick, the smell of wet soil and metal filled her lungs. She swung the light around and gasped. It was the same house, the same dimensions, the same hallways, but wrong. The wallpaper was torn, bleeding colors that pulsed faintly. The furniture sagged like it was melting, and in every mirror, her reflection lagged behind, smiling a second too late. The second house. She filmed everything, whispering notes into the recorder. I've crossed into something, some version of Harrow's house, but it feels distorted. I don't know if this is physical or hallucination, but it's real enough to touch. Upstairs, she found a bedroom identical to the one in the original house. But on the bed lay a figure. At first, she thought it was a mannequin. Pale skin, eyes shut, limbs too stiff. But then it twitched. Her light froze on the face, and her breath caught. It was William Harrow, or what was left of him. His hair was gray, his cheeks hollow, but it was him, the same man from the photos in the town archive. He looked exactly as he would have if 15 years had passed. His chest rose shallowly. He was alive. Dr. Harrow? Claire whispered. His eyes snapped open, clouded, unblinking. His lips cracked into a whisper. You shouldn't be here. Claire stumbled back, heart racing. What happened to you? He shook his head weakly. The house. It feeds. It remembers. His gaze sharpened suddenly, pinning her. And now it knows you. Before she could respond, a sound reverberated through the walls. A low, rolling knock. 3 times. Measured and heavy. The floorboards trembled. Harrow's eyes widened in panic. Go. Now. Before it chooses. Claire backed toward the door, torn between questions and terror. What chooses? But he was already convulsing, his body jerking as though strings pulled him from beneath. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and the walls pulsed in rhythm with his spasms. The knocking grew louder, shaking dust from the ceiling. She grabbed the camera and bolted down the hall. The whispers rose into a frenzy, voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. She sprinted back toward the doorway she had entered, except it wasn't there anymore. The wall was seamless, unbroken. Her flashlight darted wildly across the warped panels, searching for the frame. Nothing. Panic surged. The second house was closing around her. Then, faintly, she heard it. The voice from her dream. Low, calm, too close. Find the third. She turned, but the hallway was empty. The floor groaned beneath her, splitting slightly at the seams. A draft of freezing air surged upward. The house was coming apart. Desperate, she slammed her palms against the wall where she knew the door should be. Her camera slipped, shattering on the warped floorboards. For a moment, she thought she was trapped forever. Then, just as suddenly, the wall softened. Her hands pushed through plaster, tearing it like wet paper. She fell forward, back into the hidden study. The air was stale, still, and mercifully familiar. Behind her, the doorway was gone, sealed completely as though it had never been. Claire collapsed, gasping. The recorder lay miraculously intact beside her, still running. She snatched it up and muttered between ragged breaths. Confirmed contact with second structure. Harrow alive. not human anymore. He said the house remembers. He said, it knows me. She shut the device off, her hands trembling. She had proof now. Proof of the impossible. But more than that, she had a warning. Because if the house remembered her, it meant the story wasn't just about Harrow anymore. It was about her. The corridor breathed. Claire could feel it in her ribs. Each inhale and exhale rattling the line of doors like bones in a chest. The names etched into them seemed to glow faintly in the gloom, as if the house itself whispered them under its breath. Eleanor Price, William Harrow, dozens more she didn't know. And at the far end, gleaming faintly as though lit from within, her Claire Morgan. She couldn't look at it for long. Every time her eyes lingered, the letters seemed to twitch, bending slightly as if they were alive. She forced herself to tear her gaze away, focusing instead on the open door. Harrow's. Her heart pounded. If he was still trapped inside this place, then that room was his prison. But what did he mean when he said, "Don't let it write you"? She crept toward the door, each step echoing unnaturally loud, like boots on hollow metal. As she drew closer, she heard him again. The voice was faint, but it was his. Claire, hurry. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by the flicker of a single lantern, resting on the floor. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, bent at odd angles. In the center of the space sat William Harrow, cross-legged, his face pale and waxy, his eyes fixed on her the moment she entered. "You came back," he rasped. Claire knelt, her pulse racing. "I couldn't just leave you here. What is this place? What is the third house?" His expression twisted, grief and rage intermingled. "It's the ledger, the archive. Every name you saw out there belongs to someone the house claimed. Once it writes you into its walls, you don't leave. Not truly." Her stomach sank. "But you're alive. You're still here." "I'm not alive," Harrow whispered, his voice hollow. "Not in the way you think. I am an echo, written into this corridor like ink on paper. My body decays above ground. But down here, I remain. I endure. And now you've opened the ledger yourself." Claire's throat tightened. "My name is already on a door." He nodded slowly. "It always is. The moment you step through, it remembers you. The door forms. The only question left is whether you open it willingly, or whether it opens for you." The corridor groaned as though punctuating his words. Claire's skin prickled with cold. "I don't want to be written," she whispered. "Then you must leave, before the ledger finishes the ink," Harrow said. "But it will try to stop you. It needs a caretaker. It always does." "What do you mean?" He looked directly at her, his eyes almost glowing in the lantern light. "It chose me once, and now, Claire, it has chosen you." The words slammed into her like a hammer. She shook her head violently. "No, I didn't choose this. I don't want it." "That's how it works," Harrow said bitterly. "Choice is an illusion. The moment you step through the second house, you belong to the third. The only thing you can decide is how much of yourself you'll surrender." The lantern flickered, the shadows stretching higher up the walls. The air grew dense, as if invisible water filled the room. Claire staggered back. "There has to be a way out." Eleanor said the music. The notes. Eleanor was wrong, Harrow spat, his voice suddenly sharp. "The music opens doors, but it doesn't close them. Once you're written, the melody only binds you tighter. That's why she failed. That's why she was spared." Claire's chest tightened. "Then how do I leave?" He stared at her for a long, hollow moment, then whispered, "You don't." Her stomach lurched. "Then why did you call me here? Why tell me not to let it write me if there's no way out?" Harrow's expression flickered fear, then urgency. "Because there is a way, but it's not escape. It's replacement." Claire's blood ran cold. "The ledger demands balance," Harrow said, For one name to be erased, another must be written deeper. Someone has to take your place. Only then can you walk free. The implication hit her like ice water. He wanted her to trap someone else. No, she said firmly. I won't condemn anyone else to this. His lips curled into a thin smile. Then you'll condemn yourself. Before she could reply, the door behind her slammed shut. With a thunderous crack, the lantern sputtered, plunging them both into near darkness. The corridor outside erupted with noise. Hundreds of whispers, all speaking her name, over and over, a chorus that grew louder, until it rattled her bones. Claire, Harrow hissed, his voice low. It's already begun. If you stay here, it will drag you into your door. You need to decide now. She clawed at the door, but it didn't budge. Her flashlight flickered wildly, casting frantic arcs of light across Harrow's twisted face. There's no time, he shouted. Choose. And then silence. The whispers cut off. All at once. Claire froze, her hand still on the door handle. The air shifted, charged, like static. Slowly, she turned her head. Harrow was no longer sitting on the floor. He was standing now, taller, his posture rigid. His eyes had gone completely black. His voice, when it came, was not his own. You are the caretaker. The words reverberated from his chest, layered, as if 100 voices spoke through him. The lantern flared to life again, brighter than before, illuminating strange symbols scrawled across the walls, circles within squares, endless repeating motifs that seemed to crawl like insects. Claire stumbled backward, shaking her head. No, I'm... You opened the ledger, the voices hissed. You were chosen. You will remain. The floor cracked beneath her feet, a fissure splitting open to reveal blackness below. She screamed, clinging to the edge as the ground tilted. Harrow, or the thing wearing him, loomed over her, its face stretched unnaturally. Her fingernails scraped against the floor. The abyss yawned below, a void with no end. And then something tugged at her pocket. The journal. Harrow's journal. It had slipped partly free, its pages fluttering wildly in the storm of air. She grabbed it instinctively, clutching it to her chest. The voices recoiled, hissing in unison. The lantern shattered, plunging the room into total darkness. Claire's body jolted, and suddenly she was falling, not into the abyss, but backward through the wall itself. She tumbled into cold stone and stale air. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the hidden study. The journal lay open on the floor beside her, glowing faintly. On its fresh page, new words had been written in the same jagged hand. You delayed it, but you are still written. Claire's breath came in shallow gasps. The corridor was gone, sealed, but she knew Harrow was right. The third house had already claimed her. Her name was on a door, and sooner or later, that door would open. The study felt smaller now, as though the walls had leaned in during her absence. Dust swirled in the beam of her trembling flashlight, and the silence was thick, suffocating. Claire sat on the cold floor, staring at the glowing words in Harrow's journal. You delayed it, but you are still written. Her throat tightened. It wasn't just Harrow's madness anymore. The house, the ledger, was real, and it had carved her name into its bones. She pressed her palms against the page, half expecting the ink to smear to fade, but it clung stubbornly as if burned into the fibers. No, she whispered. There has to be a way. She stood, clutching the journal, and paced the length of the study. The walls no longer looked like plaster. Their texture shifted faintly in the light, slick as skin. Every so often, she thought she saw the faint outline of her own door. Claire Morgan, pressed into the surface, waiting to break through. She needed air. Fumbling with the lock, she shoved open the study door, and staggered into the main hall. The night outside was thick with fog, seeping in through the cracked windows, rolling in waves across the floorboards. She could barely see beyond the porch, but she didn't care. She stumbled outside, gasping lungfuls of the damp night air. The Harrow house stood silent, its windows like watchful eyes. And yet, even here in the open, she felt the ledger's pull, the weight of the third house pressed at the back of her skull, an invisible tether yanking her toward her door. Claire forced herself down the steps, across the overgrown yard, and onto the cracked pavement of the street. She didn't stop walking until she reached her car. Only then did she collapse into the driver's seat, shaking, her breath shallow. Her recorder was still running on the dashboard. She pressed stop, then rewind, desperate to anchor herself in something tangible. The tape hissed, then her own voice crackled through. "This is Claire Morgan. Time unsure. Location: Dr. Harrow's house." Her voice faltered. She listened harder. Beneath her words something whispered. Not the knocking this time. Not the chorus. A single voice, low and deliberate. "One must stay." The same phrase she'd heard on the tape, in the hidden study. The same phrase Eleanor's testimony had hinted at. Harrow had called it replacement. Someone had to stay so another could leave. Claire slammed her fist against the steering wheel. "I'm not doing it." But the words rang hollow, even to her own ears. She couldn't deny the truth. If she didn't replace herself, she'd be written forever into the ledger. She closed her eyes, gripping the recorder so tightly it bit into her palm. Faces flickered in her mind. Eleanor Price, trembling in her nursing home chair. William Harrow, hollow and broken in his cell of shadows. Was that her future? To become another name on a door, another whisper in the walls. Her phone buzzed suddenly, jolting her back to the present. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. "Claire Morgan?" The voice was male, low, cautious. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name's Daniel Shaw. You don't know me, but I know you've been inside Harrow's house." Her stomach dropped. "How could you possibly?" "I used to work with him. Briefly. 1987. He wasn't always a recluse. Some of us knew what he was building, at least in part." "I need to meet with you. Tonight." Claire's mind spun. A stranger calling now. After everything, it reeked of a trap. But she couldn't ignore the chance. "Where?" she asked, warily. "The old transit station, off Mill Road." Midnight. The line went dead. She sat in the car, pulse thundering, weighing her options. Every rational instinct told her to run far away from Mill Road, to never answer such a call. But rational instincts hadn't saved her from the second house, or the ledger. If Sean knew something Harrow hadn't told her, this could be her only way out. Midnight. She checked her watch. 11. The drive took less than 20 minutes. The transit station had long been decommissioned, its arched ceiling cracked, its platforms littered with weeds. The fog followed her here too, rolling low over the tracks, curling against the walls like restless ghosts. Daniel Shaw was waiting by the entrance, a tall man in a long coat. His hair was iron gray, his posture stiff but steady. When she approached, his gaze flicked immediately to the journal in her hands. "You found it," he said almost reverently. Claire tightened her grip. "What do you know about this?" He gestured for her to follow, leading her into the empty station. Their footsteps echoed sharply in the hollow space. "Harrow wasn't insane," Shaw said quietly. "At least not at first. He believed in layered spaces, houses built over houses. But he wasn't the first. The idea goes back centuries. Monks in Europe wrote about chambers of reflection. Ancient builders carved temples designed to fold sound until it became something more. Harrow was just the first to try it here, in Ohio." "And the ledger?" Claire asked. Shaw stopped at the center of the platform, turning to face her. His eyes were grim. That's the part we never understood. The architecture doesn't just bend sound, it bends memory. Identity. It writes people into itself. The doors are records, but also prisons. Claire's throat went dry. So you know how to get out? Shaw hesitated. I know how Harrow tried. He believed if someone else's name was written deeper than his, he could step free. A sacrifice, essentially. But there was a second theory, one he abandoned, that if the ledger itself was destroyed, everyone it had written could be freed. Her heart leapt. Destroyed how? He gave a humorless laugh. That's the problem. You can't burn it. You can't tear it. It's not just a book. It's the house itself. To destroy it would mean collapsing the house into itself. And if you're still inside when it happens, you're erased. Claire stared at him, the weight of the choice pressing down like a stone. Replacement or destruction, condemn another, or risk herself entirely. Shaw stepped closer, lowering his voice. The journal is a key. Harrow's copy. If you find the heart of the ledger, the original room where the writing began, you might use it to unmake the house, but you'll need to decide whether you can risk it. She shook her head, overwhelmed. Why are you telling me this now? Because, Shaw said grimly, your name's already written. I can hear it. Claire's blood ran cold. What do you mean? He tapped his ear. Once you've been near it long enough, you recognize the whispers. They've been calling you since you left the house. You don't have much time before your door opens. Her knees went weak. Then help me. Shaw's gaze darkened. I can't go back in. I barely made it out in '87. But I can give you this. He pulled a small vial from his coat pocket, filled with a dark, viscous liquid. Harrow called it ink, mixed from ash and blood, meant to counter the writing. If the house tries to pull you through, mark your name with this. It might weaken the bond. Claire took the vial, her fingers trembling. He gave a thin smile. No one survived long enough to know for sure. The station shuddered suddenly, a low groan rippling through the walls. Claire and Shaw both froze. The sound was unmistakable. 3 knocks, echoing through the empty space. Shaw's face blanched. It's following you. The lights flickered overhead. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the cracked walls. Claire clutched the journal to her chest, the vial digging into her palm. The ledger wasn't waiting anymore. It was hunting. The 3 knocks reverberated through the abandoned transit station, rolling along the cracked tiles and rusted beams like thunder from inside the walls. Claire froze where she stood, clutching the journal and the vial so tightly her knuckles burned white. Daniel Shaw's eyes darted across the empty platform, his breath shallow. It knows, he whispered. It's already here. The fog seeped through the broken windows in great curls, thicker than ever, dragging with it the smell of mildew and burned wires. Claire's heart pounded. The sound of the knocks came again, closer this time, sharp enough to rattle the floor under her boots. I can't stay, Shaw muttered, backing toward the exit. If it takes me again, I won't come back a second time. You said you couldn't go back in, Claire snapped, panic in her voice. So why call me here? Why now? Shaw's gaze lingered on the journal, in her arms, hunger flashing in his eyes before fear drowned it out. Because I wanted to know if you had it, if Harrow's key survived. Now I know. Then he turned and ran into the fog. Wait, Claire shouted, her voice echoing across the cavernous space. But he was gone, swallowed by the mist. The station groaned again, and she realized she was alone. No worse than alone. The house was here. Her flashlight flickered. The walls rippled, bending inward like wet paper. For an instant, she swore she saw a door forming in the plaster beside the ticket booth. Her name was etched into it in sharp, wet strokes. Claire Morgan. The handle quivered, ready to turn. She staggered backward, clutching the vial. No, she whispered. Not yet. The journal pulsed faintly, glowing like an ember. She flipped it open, pages fluttering on their own. They stopped at a fresh entry, the ink wet and jagged. Final chamber. Beneath the house. Strike the heart. Her hands trembled. That was it. The heart of the ledger. If she reached it, maybe she could end this. But the question gnawed at her. Would it free her or consume her entirely? The door bearing her name shuddered violently. A crack split through the plaster. A gust of cold air spilled out, carrying whispers. Her own voice, distorted and repeating, I am the caretaker. I am the caretaker. I am the caretaker. Claire's stomach heaved. She uncorked the vial, and with a shaking finger smeared the black liquid across her name. The ink hissed on contact, smoking like acid. The whispers shrieked in protest, the door recoiling slightly. But the letters did not vanish. They only blurred, as though resisting. It's not enough, she muttered, teeth clenched. Her gaze swept the journal again. The final chamber, beneath the house. She knew where she had to go. Gathering her courage, she sprinted into the fog, back toward the road, back toward the cursed mansion. The house loomed in the distance, waiting for her like a predator crouched in the dark. Inside, the air was colder than ever. The walls groaned, alive with motion. Her flashlight beam landed on the study, the journal quivering in her grip, as if guiding her. She yanked the desk aside, revealing the trapdoor beneath. A narrow stairwell spiraled down into a suffocating darkness. Her pulse roared in her ears as she descended. The deeper she went, the more the air thickened, like water pressing in from all sides. The journal's glow lit her path until the stairs ended in a vast subterranean chamber. It was nothing like the study above. The walls here pulsed faintly, as though made of stretched skin, inscribed with thousands of names carved into its surface. Each name glowed faintly, a lattice of souls bound in stone. She could feel their whispers crawling across her skin. At the center of the room stood a monolithic structure, a column of black stone etched with the same endless symbols, squares within circles, circles within squares. The ledger's heart. Claire staggered closer, her knees weak, her flashlight dimmed to nothing, leaving only the red glow of the names and the faint pulse of the monolith. The journal vibrated violently. In her hands, a single phrase burning across the page. Strike here. Her mind reeled. How? She had no weapon, nothing but the journal and the vial. Then the shadows stirred. Across the chamber, a figure detached itself from the wall. Harrow, or what remained of him. His face was stretched, hollowed, his eyes bottomless pits of black, his voice layered with countless others. You cannot unmake what is written, it intoned. One must stay. Claire stumbled back. Then take me, but let the others go. The figure tilted its head, almost curious. You offer yourself, yet you carry the key. It lunged, impossibly fast. Claire screamed, raising the journal instinctively. The creature slammed into it, and a burst of light filled the chamber. The names on the walls flared, shrieking like 1,000 voices released at once. The monolith trembled. She fell to her knees, the vial slipping from her hand and shattering against the stone floor. The ink spread across the ground like veins, snaking toward the monolith. Wherever it touched, the stone hissed and cracked. The creature roared, staggering, its form unraveling into smoke and shadow. Claire pressed the journal against the monolith, screaming with the last of her strength. Erase it. A thunderclap split the chamber. The monolith fractured, spilling blinding white light. The ground buckled beneath her, and for a moment she felt herself split in two. one self falling into the abyss, the other clawing desperately toward the surface, then silence. When she opened her eyes, she was outside. The mansion was gone. Only an empty lot remained, the earth scorched black where it had stood. The fog had lifted, the night suddenly calm. Her name was no longer whispering in her ears. She looked down at the journal in her lap. Its pages were blank, empty. For the first time in days, she felt the weight ease from her chest. She was free, or so she thought, as she stood, brushing dirt from her clothes. She noticed something tucked into the back of the journal, a Polaroid photo she hadn't placed there. Her hands shook as she pulled it free. The picture showed the chamber she had just destroyed, the monolith split in two, and standing in front of it, holding the journal, was her. But in the photo, she wasn't leaving. She was smiling, and behind her, a door was open, her name freshly carved. Claire dropped the photo, her stomach turning cold. The journal snapped shut with a sound too sharp, too final. The whisper returned, faint but unmistakable. One must stay. She wasn't sure anymore whether she had escaped, or if she had simply taken her place as the new caretaker of the third house. And somewhere, beneath the ground, the knocking began again. The following morning, Claire sat in her cramped kitchen, staring at the recorder on the table. She had replayed the tape twice already, listening to her frantic voice echo back at her, the whispers faint in the background, the thundering knocks. Most of all, she kept returning to the part she hadn't spoken, the voice that wasn't hers. Low, calm, too close. Find the third. Her rational mind searched for explanations. Auditory hallucination. Cross-contamination on the tape. Maybe her brain, fried with fear, had conjured it. But another part of her, the part that had seen William Harrow twitching and whispering in the other house, knew better. The voice was real. It belonged to whatever had been knocking, and it had given her a command. The third. But third what? Third house? Third room? Third person? She flipped open Harrow's journal again, searching feverishly. The diagrams blurred, pages filled with erratic notations, layered planes, resonant chambers, seams of entry. Toward the end, she found it, a passage she'd skimmed before but hadn't understood. A house is a vessel, but a vessel has walls. Within walls are doors. First house, the shell. Second house, the reflection. Third house, origin. To reach it is to end, or to begin again. Claire's pulse quickened. The third house. It wasn't just a phrase. It was the final step in whatever Harrow had been building. The hidden study wasn't his true laboratory. It was a gateway. But how to find it? She needed more than notes scribbled by a half-mad doctor. She needed context. And there was only one person left alive who might provide it. Harrow's last patient. Digging through the town's archives, Claire tracked down a medical record from 1988. The name leapt out at her. Eleanor Price, a retired piano teacher who had lived just a few blocks from Harrow's clinic. Her file mentioned sessions in acoustic therapy, discontinued abruptly due to Harrow's disappearance. Eleanor was 82 now, living in a nursing home on the outskirts of town. Claire drove there that afternoon, the journal tucked in her bag like contraband. The nursing home smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. Eleanor was seated near the window of her room, her hands folded on a crocheted blanket. Her eyes were clouded, but sharp enough to fix on Claire as she entered. "You're not family," Eleanor said, her voice brittle but steady. "You've got questions." Claire hesitated. "About Dr. Harrow." At the name, Eleanor flinched, her fingers tightening around the blanket. "I told them everything. Police, reporters. They didn't believe me then. You won't either." "I'll believe you," Claire said quickly. "Please. It's important." For a long moment, Eleanor studied her, as if weighing her sincerity. Then she nodded once. "He wasn't like other doctors. He said music could heal places medicine couldn't touch. He brought me into his house. His real house, not the clinic, said the walls had memory. That if I played the right notes, I could hear what was buried inside. Claire leaned forward. Did it work? Eleanor's eyes filled with water. I played one night, just 3 notes. Simple as breathing. The walls. They answered. The sound bent back. Wrong, but alive. And then I heard voices. Not music. Voices. They called my name. Her hand trembled as she lifted it, pointing at Claire. The same way they've called yours. Claire froze. Eleanor couldn't have known. She hadn't told her about the whispers or the voice in the journal. What did Harrow want from you? Claire asked softly. To open the third, Eleanor whispered. But I couldn't. The music wasn't enough. He said the house chose who could pass, and it didn't choose me. She leaned closer, her breath sour with age. But it's chosen you, hasn't it? Claire swallowed hard. I think it has. Eleanor sat back, her frail body trembling. Then you should run, because if you find the third, you won't come back. None of us do. Her eyes glazed, retreating into silence. No matter how Claire pressed, Eleanor said nothing more. That night, Claire lay awake, Eleanor's words replaying in her head. None of us do. And yet Harrow had gone, and somehow survived. Trapped, yes, but alive. If there was a chance of reaching him, of understanding what he had uncovered, she had to try. The third house wasn't just another level of madness. It was the core. Armed with fresh determination, she returned to Harrow's property at dusk. The crickets hummed loudly, the air thick with anticipation. She carried the journal, her recorder, and a pitch pipe she'd bought from a pawn shop. Thinking of Eleanor's story, the hidden study greeted her like a tomb. She placed the recorder on the desk and blew 3 notes into the pitch pipe. The sound reverberated oddly, bouncing off the walls in a delayed echo. For a moment, nothing. Then the wall rippled. The same seam appeared, the doorway unfurling like skin splitting open. The darkness yawned before her, swallowing the beam of her flashlight. She stepped through again. The second house pulsed around her, walls breathing in and out. The air was colder, more oppressive than before. Her reflection in the warped glass lagged longer now. Eyes moving on their own, she ignored it. Pushing deeper into the distorted halls, she followed the sound. A faint hum, like distant singing. The notes matched the pitch she'd played. It led her to the parlor, a mirror image of Harrow's real one, except the furniture sagged like wax, and the fireplace leaked ash without fire. On the mantel sat a metronome, ticking though no one had wound it. Each swing of its arm made the house vibrate. She reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed the wood, the ticking stopped. Silence fell like a curtain. Then the knocking began again. 3 heavy strikes. Rolling through the walls, Claire spun, panic rising. But this time, instead of retreating, she remembered Harrow's words. If I return, I will not be alone. She steadied herself, whispering, show me the third. The floor split open, not wide, not dangerous, but precise. A narrow fissure, stretching across the room. From within it rose a staircase, descending into pitch black. Her breath caught. The third house. Every instinct screamed to run. Eleanor's warning echoed. None of us do. But Claire forced herself down the steps. The journal clutched tight. The deeper she went, the stranger the air became. Thick, metallic, almost humming in her bones. She reached the bottom and lifted her light. The third house stretched before her, and her heart stopped. It wasn't a house at all. It was a corridor, endless, lined with doors. Each one was marked with a name. Some she recognized. Eleanor Price, William Harrow. Others were unfamiliar. And at the farthest end, though she could barely see it, was one door that made her blood run cold. It bore her name, Claire Morgan. Her knees buckled. The house hadn't just remembered her. It had prepared for her. Behind her, the stairwell closed, sealing her in. And then, as if on cue, one of the doors creaked open by itself. Harrow's. From within came a voice, broken but unmistakable. Claire, don't let it write you. The corridor shook, dust falling from the ceiling. She stumbled backward, torn between running and listening. But deep down, she knew the truth. The third house wasn't built to hold Harrow. It was built to hold whoever came next. And now, it had chosen her.